The opinions expressed by tonight's guest do not represent the opinions or position of Spaced Out Radio, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with SOR Media. Listener discretion is advised. Here at Spaced Out Radio, we are about to take you higher. Broadcasting from the Rocky Mountains of Colorado to you listening around the world. This is Spaced Out Sunday with host Tessa Nicole Thomas. You can follow Tessa on our Facebook page at Spaced Out Radio, on Twitter at TessaTNT, and you can subscribe to her YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio for the archive. But we break on command 'cause women rule the world. Buckle up, space travelers. Let the countdown begin.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's time to go for a ride with host Tessa Nicole Thomas.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening, Spaced Out Radio. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a Rocky Mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 419.9 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, August 12th, Monday, August 13th for those of you on the East Coast and beyond. This is Spaced Out Radio. I hope you had an awesome week, an even better day, and an even better evening. I am your host, Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I am live tonight broadcasting from beautiful Bayfield, Colorado. We are thousands strong across the world, nightly on Spaced Out Radio Network, spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, Paranormal Radio, TalkStream Live, as well as Deep Talk Radio, which you can find at deeptalkradio.com. Don't forget to head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, where you can peruse the Spaced Out Radio store and read the Encounter online, dealing with everything strange, paranormal, and odd. Tonight I have a treat for all you guys and gals out there, and it's different from what we generally do on Sundays. Generally, we do Psychic Sunday, but due to a loss in the family, our psychic couldn't make it tonight, and I'm sending love and light out to Alyssa and her family and hoping that, things run smoothly and the healing process comes quickly. But Dan Shaw, the Vortex detective, which we replayed his show last night, due to me working overnight security all night and all weekend, I couldn't be here. But he was so gracious to hop in and volunteer for the opening. And I know those of you that listened last night probably heard Dan's bio, but I'm going to read it again for those of you that weren't here. And let's see here. Some people spend their life in search of the guru on the mountaintop. Dan Shaw has experienced the reverse. Teachers have come to him. At age 7, Dan began doing gazing meditations and having psychic experiences. At 14, Dan was watching the dark night sky when a UFO flashed its lights from quite nearby, below the horizon. Then in 1985, at 21 years old, a midnight visit from an enchanting stranger eventually led Dan from the San Francisco area to Austin, Texas, where he began studying alchemy. In 1992, due to a series of divine interventions, Dan Shaw began to specialize in geomancy, a branch of alchemy focusing on the subtle energies of the earth. Dan travels extensively in the U.S. and abroad, researching sacred places with local vortex experts, and he corresponds with researchers all over the world. Dan Shaw earned a Bachelor of Science in Geography in 2001. Dan Shaw has authored a number of books on vortexes, including Vortex Field Guide, North America, Letters from the Vortex, and U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide, as well as Stonehenge gardening tips using earth energies in your garden. Dan Shaw can assess subtle energies of your land, home, and business and help to adjust the energetic field for greater harmony. Health and success. Dan is an extraordinary tour guide, leading groups to exotic locations. Dan Shaw is known for his enthusiastic presentation of complex ideas in ways that are fun and easy to understand for audiences of all ages. His live public presentations encompass a wide array of scientific and paranormal subjects, exhibit a collection of inspiring, beautiful images and visionary maps, and involve audiences engaged in engaging participatory experiences. Dan's writings and videos can be seen at vortexmaps.com and danshaw.com. Whew, I got tongue-tied towards the end and actually lost my place. Hey, Dan, welcome. Thanks so much for coming in tonight.
Thanks for having me, Tessa.
It's so good to have you. I'm going to turn you up a little bit because you're a little quiet on my end. So how has Montana been treating you? I know you've been doing tours there for the Montana Vortex.
That's right. That's just by the west entrance of Glacier National Park. There's a tourist attraction here that is a genuine vortex. In other words, there's some kind of electromagnetic anomaly here. And you can actually see that pretty clearly on a map provided by the USGS. There's a magnetic hotspot here, I'll call it. Yeah.
Nice. Have you had any different experiences, anything that's outstanding in your mind as far as things that don't generally happen elsewhere?
Well, definitely visitors to the Montana Vortex will see some phenomena that they really have never seen before and can't see anywhere else. And it's a tremendous joy for me because we just get a full spectrum of visitors here. Some people have no idea what they're about to see. They maybe just stop to visit the gift shop, no idea what is a vortex. And other people, well, they've got a lot to teach me about how to sense and work with subtle energies. So it's a real gift for me to be able to interact with such a wide range of people and on such an intensive basis. I give sometimes 8 tours in a day. Sometimes it's quite young children and just people from all walks of life. Of course, people who are out on motorcycle rides, people who are visiting Glacier with their families, people who maybe have visited the Vortex in the past and they're coming around a second or third time to bring other people to see the phenomena here. And we give an hour-long tour. There are 8 other genuine vortexes, a total of 8, so including the Montana Vortex, total of 8 genuine vortexes open as tourist attractions around the country. I may be biased, but I've been to them all, and the Montana Vortex is the best, in my opinion. We're showing things here. Most notably, perhaps, is a phenomenon we call the shrink and grow, where people appear taller when they stand in one spot and shorter when they stand in another. There's a visual, visually you can see the effect of the vortex, people shrink and grow.
Yeah, I saw a video that you were in. You were actually on the History Channel, and I was trying to remember the name of the show. What was it?
That's Brad Meltzer's Decoded.
Yes.
And there's an episode on the Devil's Triangle, Alaska, they call it. And they were saying that, Alaska is known for having a very high number of disappearances. And so they were investigating, Brad Meltzer's Decoded was investigating disappearances in this area of Alaska. And I have a friend and fellow tour guide and co-author, Nick Nelson, and he's been working with magnets all his life. He's been able to recreate, in effect, artificially create the vortex effect with a certain arrangement of magnets. So he's got a device called the Golden Vortex, which you can get at at goldenvortex.com. And it's simply a little, about the size of a $50, little plastic pendant that's got an arrangement of magnets in it, and it actually recreates this shrink and grow effect. And I was able to demonstrate that for a couple of the hosts of the Decoded show. So you can actually buy a portable vortex. It's like a portable mountaintop, and it does people experience healing effects from this arrangement of magnets, the Golden Vortex.
That's awesome. And I've also, have you heard of the purple plates? It's like a Tesla thing.
Yeah, I got a plate of my own, yeah.
Yeah, you do? That's awesome. Yeah, I heard it has like the same effects as you are describing that the Golden Vortex does, as far as, healing properties, energy. Like I have a friend that has one, and her energy is just off the charts. I wish I could tap into that. But yeah, Corrine, she said she'd send me some. I haven't sent her my address yet, so that's probably why I don't have one, but I'm excited to see the effects that it really does have, and it's pretty awesome. I also want to get one of those Golden Vortexes. Where can I find that?
Well, at goldenvortex.com, there's a couple different models. The basic model's about $50. And the purple plates now, it's been so long since I've got that. I'm trying to remember now what the product information around that is, but it's essentially just a little flat metallic plate. It's of a purple color, and it's a little bigger than a credit card, I guess. And it does seem to have some nice energy around it, and I generally use it at my water dispenser to energize water. The Golden Vortex has a little hole in the middle, and you can pour water through it. So that's also a way to energize drinking water. And then, of course, there's any number of ways to energize drinking water. You can use essentially any kind of energy. It could be sound energy. It could be, you could say Reiki or Chi energy. Any number of ways to energize water. Once you have energized water, of course, you can drink it, and you can use it for watering plants and, of course, for your animals. And it does seem that there's an association all over the world. Many ancient monuments are designed with energetic materials that have an electromagnetic property and involve hydraulics, engineering of water, moving water, storing water, and then potentially using that water to enhance the fertility and productivity of crops and livestock and also our human health.
That's awesome. I'd like to know how exactly that works, but I'm sure they haven't figured it out really themselves. Maybe it kind of ionizes it, or just changes the chemistry of it somehow. I know my family, we were sick for a little bit, and a friend of mine had some silver bars, and she's like, here, let's put this in this water, and then you drink it, and it's supposed to make you better. And it actually, I felt like it worked. Do you have any idea how exactly it does change the properties of the water?
Well, I have some idea. Different researchers have different ideas, and there's many different methods, but in general, there is no such thing as pure water, pure H2O, except maybe in some laboratory somewhere. Generally in the wild, you could say in rainwater or in drinking water, just water from springs or wells even. There's a certain mineral content. So in general, water, H2O, plus some other things in it. But there's a certain bonding angle between the hydrogen and the oxygen. And that may be, in general, may be kind of chaotic. And so just as a kind of a shorthand, you can think of energized water as being structured water. In other words, those hydrogen-oxygen bonds might be better structured, have a more precise or more regular kind of an angle between the atomic bonds. And you're talking about silver, and it's very well demonstrated, generally recognized by modern science, that silver, what do I want to say, minute particles of silver, essentially nanoparticles, do have an antibiotic effect. So you can get a device, I believe one of the people who produced these silver devices is Peter Lindemann, Lindemann. And by running a tiny electrical charge through a couple of silver plates, effectively tiny particles of silver are dissolved in the water or suspended in the water, and these have an antibacterial effect. So that's generally recognized by modern science, that when you have silver particles of a certain size, a very tiny size of silver particle, that does have an antibiotic effect. So that's a great device if you're, say, traveling to a foreign country where the water may be a little suspect.
Yeah, I know. I went with one of my old boyfriends. I went to visit his mom in Las Cruces, and him and his brother went rock climbing, and her and I went to Mexico, and she's like, whatever you do, don't drink the water. And that's what I drink. I don't really like to drink soda or anything else like that. And so just automatically out of habit, I ordered the water, and she crawled up one side and down the other of me and was like, I told you not to order the water. But I was like, I'm sorry, I just totally forgot. I'm just so used to it. That's all I usually drink with my meal. But yeah, it's so awesome how the scientific field comes in and actually recertifies or lets us know that, you know, certain things do work. It's so hard in the paranormal field to you know, get the same outcome repeatedly, and that's how the scientific effect goes. You have to get a repeated, you know, same thing happening. And with, you know, ghosts or whatnot, it's hard to get that. It's got to be a sterile environment, and you got to have the same outcome over and over. But they've recently come out and said that sage does actually work when cleansing your house. It changes the negative ions positive, and so it's just great when they can come through and do that, and, you know, just recertify it in our minds that this does actually work, and it's not just some sort of fairy tale or folklore or whatnot.
Right, and I should mention the work of Emoto. Some of your listeners will no doubt be aware of the research of this fellow whose name is Emoto, who is working with effectively broadcasting our thoughts and emotions into water, and then I think freezing water and looking at water under a microscope to see that water that has a positive intention put in has a more beautiful, elegant structure to it. So there's the Emoto work as well, if people aren't familiar. that's a pretty fruitful avenue to do research.
Yeah, I think I did see that experiment on Facebook, and it shows, put this jar of, I think it's water, vinegar, and salt, and you put it in the area where you generally hang out, and whatever energy it absorbs, there's just a different, like, crystalline sort of design in each one, and you can tell which one is negative and which one is positive, and it's so interesting how that all works out like that.
And then, of course, you can make remedies by infusing water with gems. Even just if you have a quartz crystal or some kind of crystal, whatever type it might be, healing crystals, and you can just place it in your drinking water, and that imparts a kind of a frequency to your water, and that's it. Or your bath. Let's say, not the drinking water, your bath water, and you can create crystal elixirs in that way, almost very much like a homeopathic remedy.
Yeah,
so maybe maybe we better bring that back to vortexes and kind of tie the loop back together.
Yeah.
In vortexes, we're talking about places which seem to contribute to the paranormal. So, wherever you are, there's going to be a certain characteristic or signature of the electromagnetic field. There are dozens of components that contribute to the electromagnetic field, no matter where you are, whether you're on an island, on a mountaintop, in a valley, near a volcano. Doesn't have to be an exotic location. No matter where you are, if you're near some kind of body of water, near a river, there's a very specific electromagnetic fingerprint to where you are, and that energetic field influences your electromagnetic field. Of course, our bodies are mostly made up of water, and our cells are a kind of antenna receiving frequencies. And so the electromagnetic field, wherever you are, is going to influence your physiology, your cells, your brain cells, your psyche, your spiritual and emotional state. And so by understanding, by essentially looking with energy eyes, looking with electromagnetic eyes, or an awareness of the electromagnetic field, that gives us an ability to sense, to be aware, and to work with these, what I might call, subtle energies. And there are I think, different types. Let's say there's electromagnetism is kind of a gross energy in the sense that gross as compared to subtle. So electromagnetism, that's something that can be studied by modern science. It's beginning to be better understood, let's say. Our understanding of electromagnetism is kind of young. We're kind of babies in the scientific realm on some level. Although I think ancient societies had a pretty good understanding of electromagnetism. But when I talk about vortexes, to me it does remain mysterious. I don't think electricity and magnetism can completely explain it. And there are more subtle levels of energy, you might say etheric or astral energies as well, that come into play.
It's pretty interesting how that works. And how do you suggest, like, people draw from that energy that the earth does provide?
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely one thing would be to walk barefoot on the earth, wherever earth has moisture and minerals in it, which is everywhere. There's electricity coursing underneath our feet through the earth, where when we're wearing shoes, those soles of our shoes are 99% of the time, those are electrically insulating us from the electromagnetic field of the Earth. So hugging a tree, literally, walking barefoot on the Earth, those are both ways to connect our electromagnetic field with the Earth. Eating wild foods, breathing the air, drinking the water from pure sources, those are all great ways to connect ourselves with the electromagnetic field of the Earth. And of course, meditation, visualization. You can visualize yourself connecting, grounding your subtle energy body, your aura, to the Earth, the crystal core of the Earth, some people like to say, and also to the sun. So by visualizing, we can strengthen that electromagnetic connection to everything around us as well.
Yeah, I was watching a video where they were talking about shoes and how it's keeping us from contacting the Earth, especially being rubber-soled or rubber bottoms. And just taking off your shoes, I agree. Take off your shoes and just walk around and connect back with that energy of the Earth. And it really does help. It's amazing how it works, but so many different health issues have happened since we started wearing rubber-soled shoes. It's just one on top of the other on top of the other. But that being said, we have a question from the chat room, and Bill Hauser is asking, the Oregon Vortex effect on gravity and magnetism, how powerful is that vortex to the other?
Well, first of all, that's pretty amusing that the first question comes in from the name Bill Hauser, because the owner of the Montana Vortex is actually named Joe Hauser.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hauser, and we find synchronicities like that at vortexes all over. In fact, the current owner, the Montana Vortex, Joe Hauser, the original owner back in 1970 was named Joe Hauber, Hauber. It was one letter different. So the Oregon Vortex is in Gold Hill, Oregon. I actually live very near the Oregon Vortex. I've visited it a number of times. And it's on a little creek called Sardine Creek, and it's between some very steep hills. Those hills in that area, the Klamath and Siskiyou Mountains, are pretty surprisingly steep, really. And so wherever you have changes in elevation, and this also relates back to, and I'll circle back to the question for sure, but this relates to the previous question as well, because as elevation increases, you get an increased electrical potential. This is why you should never be out on a golf course with your golf clubs in a lightning storm, or up on a peak during a lightning storm. Those higher peaks are more likely to be struck by lightning because they have a higher electrical potential. So even just wearing shoes, there's a difference in electrical potential between the earth and 5 or 6 feet up your head. So it's demonstrable by, again, generally recognized by modern science, that the cells are going to be in a different state when you're electrically grounded to the earth as opposed to when you're insulated by wearing shoes. So the Oregon Vortex is one of these 8 genuine vortexes, genuine electromagnetic anomalies that are open as tourist attractions. And as the name implies, there may well be an involvement of gold there at Gold Hill, Oregon. In other words, ore and mineral deposits in the earth. Again, there's a couple dozen components that contribute to the electromagnetic field wherever you are. One is surface features, such as these steep hills. One is subsurface features, such as ore and mineral deposits. And of course, when you go deeper, you end up at the molten part of the core of the earth. And then there's also there is a crystal core of the earth. crystals are formed with a very slow cooling. That's how crystals are formed. And, of course, when we're talking about crystals, we're talking about materials that have a very regular structure. That's why crystals tend to have facets, because the molecular structure is very regular. And then another thing that can contribute to one of the main contributors to the electromagnetic field on Earth is, of course, the sun. So you've got a number of components contributing. In addition, I mentioned Sardine Creek is right there at the Oregon Vortex. Mm-hmm. Wherever you have a body of water that creates a variation in the electromagnetic field, that water is never pure out in the wild. It's always got some dissolved minerals in it. Where water has minerals in it, it's a conductor of electricity. Those electrons are flowing. That creates a magnetic field. And water isn't the kind of magnet that attracts iron. It's not that kind of magnet. It's a slightly different kind of magnetism called paramagnetism, as opposed to diamagnetism. So water actually absorbs the magnetic field that surrounds it. So a lot of contributors to the electromagnetic field. Wherever you are at the Oregon Vortex, you'll see the shrink and grow phenomena. They'll demonstrate some other kinds of vortex phenomena there. And one of the principles of alchemy is that anything that can heal can kill. And I consider the vortex work a kind of geomancy, and geomancy to be a subset of alchemy. So the alchemical principles apply to geomancy in the study of vortexes. And some people feel that the energy at the Oregon Vortex is not necessarily a healing energy. The more I spend time at vortexes, the more I'm convinced that one of the qualities, one of the characteristics of vortexes is that the energy is particularly dynamic, and you could even say turbulent. And it's not necessarily healthy for a person to spend too much time in a vortex energy. It may be overstimulating. So some people, I'll qualify, I'll say some researchers believe, and I also believe, that the energy at the Oregon Vortex is not necessarily positive. It is strong, and when you go there, you don't even have to go through the entrance, really. Even out in the parking lot, you may feel that you can feel that energy. Different people feel it different ways. Some people feel it in their head, some in their stomach. It may feel like a sense of motion. People may get a little bit of a motion sickness there, and I do have it on good authority from Ben Hansen, who is the host of a show called Fact or Faked. Mm-hmm. That on the show, at the Oregon Vortex, they say that warm-blooded animals tend to avoid the Oregon Vortex. So that does tell you that it's not necessarily a good energy. And so on the show, Ben got some horses and got on the horses and approached the Oregon Vortex. And in fact, Ben tells me, they did actually shy away from the Oregon Vortex. So when you visit a vortex, you do need to be self-aware and not hang out too long, especially if you're very sensitive to the energy. If the energy doesn't feel beneficial, then be aware and don't stay too long.
Yeah, and it is funny how animals, whether it be your dog or your cat, or like you were saying, these horses can pick up on that energy. It's like they have, that sixth sense or something, and that also they have a different visual effect than we do. But how they pick up on that, and it's so important to pay attention to them and what they are picking up on. I don't know how many times in my house is quite haunted, but the animals here, especially my cat, Wonky, he was named that when I adopted him, but he walks wonky, he runs wonky, and when he tries to jump on the couch, he looks like somebody threw him up there. But he's seen things before I have, and then I'll pay attention to his cues and look closer, and, you know, there is actually something there, but definitely take cues from these animals. And on that note, we have something here from Adenome Solar Rocker, and he wants to know, how many gnomes fit in Dan's pocket?
Okay, I guess that's a fair question, but before we go there, to respond to your previous point, our bodies and our brains are very precise and sensitive antenna. Modern cell phones, and I think I did mention this in our last interview, the reason that we can, that cell phones work, remember in the old days, your cell phone had an antenna. You had to kind of pull out your antenna to get it to work. Back in the old days. Any piece of wire is, in effect, an antenna. It's going to vibrate, or it's going to receive frequencies of that wavelength. Yeah? Modern cell phones, the thing that makes a modern cell phone possible is that when fractals were first discovered. Now, a fractal is a shape that is self-similar at different magnifications. When you see a fractal, what happens is you can zoom in, and as you zoom in, you keep seeing that same shape recurring, right? So when fractals kind of first came to public attention, somebody wondered, well, what would happen if I made an antenna in the shape of a fractal? And by doing so, you end up being able to make a very small antenna. You no longer need a large antenna to pick up a wavelength of a certain length. Okay, so our brains are full of crenellations. Our brains are a very sensitive kind of an antenna, and hair is a kind of an antenna. So animals with fur, cats, they're like a big antenna. All that fur, the whiskers, they're very much like an antenna. And trees are also fractal in nature, and they also function as antennas. And I did mention last time, I think, in wartime, antennas are very expensive to construct, and they're very vulnerable. And so research has been done showing that with modern signal processing, you can actually use trees as antennas for ultra-low frequency broadcasting and receiving. So I just wanted to come back to that point. Now, how many notes in my pocket? That's pretty amusing. How many angels on the head of a pin, right? And I don't consider myself to be particularly psychic. Over time, I've become more sensitive to subtle energies, but I'm not the kind of person, although I've had some miraculous experiences in my life, I don't consider myself particularly psychic. I'm not the kind of person who's seeing fairies and gnomes and this kind of thing, but I've had enough miraculous experiences to know that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in the minds of men, to quote Shakespeare. And so I do very much believe in these alternative, I don't want to say alternative realities, but in other dimensions and other beings who are sometimes visible to some people in this dimension. And a vortex really is a gateway or a portal into other dimensions, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Just like Halloween is thought of as a time when the veil between worlds is very thin. So at times like solstices and equinoxes, the veil between worlds is very thin. There's really no separation between our dimension and other dimensions. And vortexes are a place where people have access to these other realms, where these other beings are very active. At the Montana vortex, we get photos of orbs quite regularly. Some people can just see orbs with the naked eye. An orb is, to most people, just looks like a ball of light. And it's common to get photos of these balls of light. Each one is distinct. When you get two photos in a row, you can see them rotating. We've seen them moving around. people inside the house. And we're in Blackfoot territory here in Montana. We get Blackfoot and Blackfeet Indians coming through the vortex all the time. And they, of course, have a long oral tradition, and they recognize these orbs as being spirits. And there is a connection between all of these paranormal phenomena. Some Bigfoot researchers believe that the Bigfoot is an interdimensional being, that they can manifest as Bigfoot, they can manifest as orbs, they can exist inside of trees, some researchers believe. So it's not too far afield. I think your person on the chat line was making a joke, but it touches on a real topic, in my opinion, and
well,
that is. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, he asked this question quite a bit to most of our guests.
How many fit in their pocket?
Yeah, how many gnomes fit in your pocket? And I'm thinking particularly your jungle gear, your jungle safari outfit, because I think those pockets are bigger. So how many gnomes would fit in those pockets?
Okay, that's pretty amusing. I do like to dress the part, and I do have shirts and pants that have a lot of pockets in them, and I do keep certain gear in my pockets for the Vortex tours and such. But I think he's teasing a little bit.
Yeah. If you could make an educated guess, what would you guess? I'm just kidding.
Well, I would say an infinite number.
Yeah,
sure.
as they differ in size for sure. But on a more serious note, Adnome Solar Rocker is asking, is it true that diamonds are worthless, since we're speaking of minerals, which we were earlier, but sometimes our questions get out there a bit.
Oh, well, I wouldn't say worthless, because every stone has a unique signature. Certainly the vibratory frequency of a diamond is a very specific frequency because it's such a pure mineral. I think what they might be referring to is the question of, are diamonds really rare, or are they perhaps more abundant than we're led to believe? And pretty sure that it's true that a very limited number of people control access to diamonds, and they are intentionally keeping a limited amount of diamonds in supply, or they're only bringing a certain number of diamonds to market at a time, artificially depressing the supply to artificially increase the value of diamonds. I think that's what he's referring to. So every stone has unique healing properties for certain.
Yeah, I was reading an article about how we are being overcharged for these diamonds. And I know in a lot of places there are so many hardships and stuff, and that's where the blood diamond term comes from. People are killed over these things, but they are out there. There are a lot of them, and we are actually being overcharged for them. And I believe it's, isn't it Mercury, where it actually rains diamonds? It's one of those planets. I believe it's Mercury, but I digress. But it's pretty interesting, how we take these different gems, minerals, and stones and put different values on them. And to me, there's other stones that are more valuable to me, like tourmaline and purple quartz and different things like that do have amazing aspects about it. But the diamond is just so glimmering pretty. People are willing to pay so much for it. But I do think the price on that is a bit higher than they really should put on it. But like you were saying, the control is, a small number. So, whoever's got the monopoly in that is going to be able to put whatever price on it they want.
Right. Historically, there's a close correlation between British colonialism and who controls these resources, the diamond mines.
Yeah, and Robert White in the chat room is saying, as a lapidarian, diamonds are plentiful and the people in control just want to make money.
Often true. Actually, I think the people with money want to be in control.
And Ad Gnome, I believe on your answer for how many gnomes fit in your pocket, he says, okay, this dude is cool. He can come back. And that's for sure. We'll have Dan Shaw back anytime. He's my favorite so far. We always like to have a laugh in here because
I appreciate that.
Laughter is the best medicine.
Yeah, we can't take ourselves too seriously. For sure.
So do you find that your experience as being a tour guide at the Montana Vortex is any different from, say, the Oregon one? You were saying that one's more negative. Are they all negative, or do they have their different energetic properties?
Well,
what is the difference between, like, the Oregon and the Montana Vortex?
Well, different people respond differently to the same energies. Yeah, everybody's unique. Some people may find that a certain place is beneficial at a certain time and not at others, for example. So I don't want to overgeneralize, but your own energy field, let's use you for an example, Tessa. You may find that a certain place feels wonderful for you at a certain time. At the same time, it may not feel wonderful to somebody else. And at a different time, it's going to have a different energy. So a place that feels good for you at one time may not feel good for you at another. We're looking at various kinds of cycles that affect the electromagnetic field. So I've mentioned a number of components to the electromagnetic field. The sun, the surface features such as mountain peaks or valleys, the subsurface features such as ore and mineral deposits. And I'll just expand on that slightly. We have where you have ore and mineral deposits, you get unique soil types. There you have unique plant and animal species. And then, of course, people are attracted for the unique beauty of the place. So those are components of the electromagnetic field. You also have cycles. So you have solar cycles, both short and long term. There's 11-year cycles and 22-year cycles of the sun, and then there's much longer cycles for the sun. You also have very short-term perturbations of the sun. In other words, you've got solar flares and that kind of thing, and so there's solar storms that affect the Earth. And then you have daily cycles, such as the moon orbiting the Earth every day. And I'll expand on that just slightly. As the moon orbits the Earth every day, creating the ocean tides, you actually get continental tides as well. In other words, just the sheer mass and weight of the oceans alters slightly the shape of the Earth itself. Quartz crystal. Quartz is one of the most abundant minerals in the Earth, or at least silicon is one of the most abundant. Where it's formed into crystals, quartz crystal is electric. In other words, under pressure. Under pressure, quartz crystal gives off an electrical charge. It's piezoelectric, or you might say piezoelectric if you're British. Yeah. So, underground, quartz crystal is under pressure, and so quartz crystal contributes to the electromagnetic field of the Earth. In the U.S., we have a massive, continuous, you could even say a monolithic mass of quartz crystal. It stretches across several states, underneath Arkansas and several contiguous states there. So as the moon orbits around the Earth every day, there's this varying pressure on this quartz crystal that's underground, so you get kind of a sine wave in effect. You get a increasing and lessening electromagnetic charge out of the quartz crystal that's underground. So you've got the daily cycles that include the moon cycle, and then you've got the solstices and equinoxes, and many researchers find that at those days, solstices and equinoxes, these energetic lines, you could call them ley lines, which is, I think, overgeneralizing because there are many kinds of energy lines, ley lines. And in our last interview, I couldn't come up with the name Watkins. Alfred Watkins was the person who is credited for, he coined the term ley, L-E-Y. Mm-hmm. And to him, this was a rifle straight line. Last time, I kind of skipped over his name, Alfred Watkins. So we have these lines of energy, earth energy, electromagnetic or geophysical energy. Some researchers find that at solstice and equinoxes, these lines expand. There's a lot of different opinions, differing opinions among vortex researchers. Some feel that at the solstice and equinoxes, the ley lines collapse. But in either case, on solstices and equinoxes, these are very powerful times to be at vortex points and doing prayer, meditation, ceremony, dancing, barefoot, drumming, singing, maybe burning sage or incense, whatever ceremony means to you. Very powerful times for enhancing our psychic abilities and empowering our prayers. Mm-hmm. So there's also these time cycles involved in when vortexes are active. So again, for any one person, a certain vortex may feel differently at different times.
Yeah, and we had a question here from Catalina in the chat room, and she's wondering, does snow affect a vortex?
Well, first of all, I like the name Catalina. I think last time I might even have mentioned the Catalina Islands off the California coast. There's some islands which are nature preserve. And again, where you have an island, you've got a unique electromagnetic signature. Obviously, it's some land surrounded by water, so that gives it a unique electromagnetic signature. The Catalina Islands, you've got some rare plants and animals. Also, that would be very near the Nixon home, the home of former President Nixon. And you also have the San Onofre nuclear plant. And very often at vortex points, you do find government involvement, presidential retreats, military bases, airports, particle accelerators. Often these places are preserved as parks, satellite dish arrays, that kind of thing. So Catalina is a great name, number one. Now, in terms of snow, let's take it all the way. Let's look at glaciers. At this time, we are in an interglacial period. In other words, over geologic ages, glaciers come and go. There's these very pronounced climate cycles. Right now, people are so involved in talking about global warming, people need reminding. We are in an interglacial period. We should expect right now that the glaciers would be melting. There probably is some kind of anthropogenic or man-made component to the climate warming, yes, but I would say man-made factors are not the overwhelming factors for global warming. We are in an interglacial period. No matter how much we do as humans to contribute to global warming, I think we're going to end up in another glacial age. So if you look at a place like Yosemite, Yosemite is just full of Yosemite Valley, the Yosemite National Park area, the Sierras in general, full of different kinds of electromagnetic fields, very vortexy, I would say. Where you have glaciers, the glaciers in the past, the glaciers were just miles thick. There was a tremendous amount of weight on the landscape. and this would have increased the pressure on quartz crystal deposits. The Sierra Nevadas are a massive batholith, in effect, so to speak. Their Sierra Nevada mountain range is a massive block of granite, which formed underground. When magma is underground, at a certain temperature, it does not have any electromagnetic field. There's a point called the Curie point. When rock is heated to a certain temperature, it loses its electromagnetic field. But sometimes magma cools underground. It doesn't always extrude in a volcano. Sometimes it cools slowly underground. Mm-hmm. That is what created the granite of the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was formed underground and then eventually exposed through uplift and through erosion. Yeah, the Yosemite Valley has seen many different cycles of glaciation. And so
I hate to interrupt, but we got to go to break right now.
Oh, of course we do. We'll come back to snow and glaciers.
Indeed. We'll be back right after these messages.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from Your Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
There's news and there's the encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and I want you to come on a nightly journey. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, every Monday through Friday, you can come hang out with me and the other space travelers. We have it all from Carl the Alien bouncing on by to those misfit gnomes causing havoc. It's 3 hours of fun and entertainment on those topics the mainstream really doesn't want to touch. Come get all paranormal with us at spacedoutradio.com, and together, my friends, along with our resident guitar god Bumblefoot, we own the night.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Tonight's show and topic of discussion do not necessarily reflect the opinion of Spaced Out Radio, SOR Media, or its hosts. Listener discretion is advised. Here comes the second hour of Spaced Out Sunday with host Tessa Nicole Thomas. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio. And you can follow Tessa on Twitter at TessaTNT. Now, back to the show.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm so glad to be back. I missed you guys last night. I was doing overnight security for the last week, and I really was going through SOR withdrawals, I have to tell you. And I hate doing a replay. That was my first time doing that, and like I said, I really missed you guys, and I'm so glad to be back tonight, and I am so extremely happy, and I feel so lucky to have Dan Shaw back. He's one of my most favorite guests. Dan, thank you so much for coming in so last minute. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's kind of you to say.
So we left off on the Yosemite glaciers or glaciations.
Yeah, one of your listeners had a question about snow, and I kind of moved the goal field a little bit and started out talking about glaciation. We're talking about how underground quartz crystal is under pressure, and how quartz crystal is piezoelectric. In other words, under pressure gives off an electrical charge. In the case of Yosemite is a pretty great example. It's a Yosemite National Park. Yosemite Valley is a little bit of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, which is a massive block of granite that formed underground. The magma actually intruded as compared to when a volcano extrudes magma and it hardens into lava. Granite formed underground. It cooled underground. There's quite a bit of quartz crystal in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, and also gold, I might add, of course. So over time, when the land is covered with just miles and miles of glacier, it's under intense pressure. Then as the glaciers retreat, and I mentioned we're in an interglacial age right now, as the glaciers retreat, that pressure is released, and the granite has a life cycle. You could say it's born when it cools and hardens. When it cools past the Curie point, then it takes on the electromagnetic field that surrounds it, and it holds that as an imprint. In fact, it's like an imprint of the electromagnetic field at the time it cooled. Then over the life cycle of granite, as it is exposed, as it is uplifted and exposed through erosion, then the granite actually starts to peel away. The pressure is released, and instead of being under tension, instead of being under compression, it starts to exfoliate. The reason that Half Dome is dome-shaped and the feature called the Arches at Yosemite is actually kind of a similar shape, but in reverse. And the reason that is because the granite actually flakes off, it exfoliates. So there's a number of kinds of forces. If you look at Stonehenge, for example, you've got the uprights, and then you've got a stone across the uprights. Those are called trilithons, where you've got two stones and then the stone across. So that stone that lays across the two uprights, that causes the two uprights to be under compression. But the stone that's laying across the two uprights, that's actually under tension. And that's why those stones have a kind of an acoustic property to them. Under tension, certain stones almost ring when you hit them. They almost ring like a bell. Because you've got a couple different kinds of forces going on. You've got compression, you've got tension. So as the glaciers retreat, that releases pressure on the granite, which forms Yosemite in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And that creates a different electric effect for that quartz crystal. And then we can come back to snow. Now, when snow falls on the ground, it kind of levels out the topography. It fills in the valleys. There's a little less variation in the topography, if you can kind of picture that. So that does shift the electromagnetic field as the snow piles up. That snow, of course, you can imagine those snowflakes. They tend to have a hexagonal or a six-sided shape to them. And earlier we were talking about the structure of water, and of course snowflakes have a very particular geometric structure. Now, additionally, acoustic energies, sound energies, are part of the electromagnetic spectrum that I consider to be part of the contributing factor to vortexes. Mm-hmm. So I take a very geophysical approach to vortexes. I have a degree in geography. I'm not a geophysicist. I didn't go that far in my schooling, but I do tend to focus on the geophysics. So when you have snowfall, you've got the leveling off to some degree, of the extremes in the topography, the mountains and valleys. You also have, that wonderful sense of how quiet things are out in the snow. It's almost like being out in the desert. You almost have the effect of being in an anechoic chamber. Now, an anechoic chamber is a chamber that's been specifically built to cancel out echoes. They're often used for audio recording. You can imagine like a little sound booth that's got the foam on the walls, kind of the eggshell type foam to cancel out the echoes. I wish I were in that kind of acoustic environment right now. I hope you can hear me good.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're out in the snow, the acoustics, the sound is very different, and I do consider that to be a contributing factor to the vortex effect. So that's the long answer to how snow might influence your local vortex.
Yeah, and last time you were on, and again as well, Ronald in the chat room is saying, vortices, Tessa. So is it called vortexes or vortices?
Okay, that's totally fair. If you're, speaking in popular terms, you might say aquariums, forums, mediums. But of course, if you're speaking in a scientific forum, you might say aquaria, fora, that kind of thing, and you'd use the Latinate ending, right? So I sometimes say vortices, but for my own purposes, I prefer to speak in kind of more popular terms. So I prefer to say vortexes when I'm referring to what I think of as paranormal vortexes. That's the plural that I prefer. But if we're talking about in scientific terms, about vortices, in other words, whirlwinds and whirlpools and that manner of thing, then I might use the more Latinate or scientific term for pluralizing vortex as vortices. So I'm of the opinion they're both correct. One's just kind of more popular. It is kind of more, to say vortexes, it's a little more slang. But that's the way I prefer it.
Yeah, and Robert also in the chat room was mentioning when you work with crystals, it gives it more of an elemental effect and something as to the energy of the person that is working the stone. And he actually said they kind of sing to him when he's working them, and they basically tell him what shape they want to be in, so that's interesting. But we do have a few questions from the chat room. This one here is from Bill, and he's wondering, what about Bridal Falls in British Columbia, Canada? Does it have energy vortex, or is it powerful because it's running water?
Ooh, nice. Well, first of all, I want to remark that I love how Robert describes how the stones speak to or sing to him and tell him what shape they want to be. I'm a student of alchemy, and as such, I believe that everything is conscious and everything is divine. There is nowhere where God is not, if I can use the word God, however you think of the divine. The divine is everywhere, it's all one, and so the stones have a consciousness, they're divine, so I love that. Now in terms of falls, there's more than one fall called Bridal Veil Falls for sure, but falls are phenomenal, let's say, schoolroom for studying vortexes. So when you imagine yourself, or when you're at a waterfall, think of the sound of the waterfall. It's very, very rich in frequencies. It's almost like a kind of a white noise. In other words, the whole broad spectrum of frequencies. There's also, I would say, a fundamental frequency. In other words, depending on where you're standing in relationship to the waterfall, there's a dominant frequency, one that is kind of louder or more predominant than the others. That frequency will tend to vibrate a certain part of your body, a certain chakra. And we can think of the chakras. A chakra is essentially, it's a wheel of energy in your body. It's essentially a vortex in your body. And the vortex outside your body, the waterfall, is going to vibrate with one of your chakras. And that may depend on where you're standing in relationship to the waterfall. So you've got this broad spectrum of sound, and then you've got a predominant sound. You're hearing it through both ears, but you're hearing slightly different frequencies through both ears. So as you hear these two frequencies, and we could narrow it down to just two frequencies. If you hear one frequency through one ear and another frequency through the other, and they are only a few cycles per second apart, your brain actually puts them together, and you end up perceiving a third frequency, and that frequency may be, you actually may hear it as a beat. And this has been in the popular literature. It's been called binaural beats. In other words, bi meaning two, oral meaning ears. Yeah, so if you're hearing two slightly different frequencies, one through each ear, your brain's going to actually hear that third frequency, even if that frequency, or I might say especially, if that frequency is just a few cycles per second, or hertz. It'll be below the threshold of human hearing, but it'll be in the range of brain frequencies. In other words, our brain's operating generally in a range of frequencies, which is, I think, from 0 up to 20 or 30 cycles per second, depending. They're often known as, by their Greek letters, alpha, beta, delta, theta. And so listening to two frequencies that are very close together, one through each ear, will actually help entrain the brain into a meditative state. So we're still talking about waterfalls, yes? So the acoustic properties of waterfalls are very rich, and as you move around the waterfall, the dominant frequency, the sound of the waterfall will change. Additionally, around waterfalls, you have a very electrically charged environment. The air is electrically charged. It's full of ions. And I think I need to correct you what you said earlier. You mentioned positive ions and negative ions.
Mm-hmm.
The negative ions are the ones that make us feel very good. Around waterfalls, after an electrical storm, we can kind of smell the ozone in the air. There's a lot of negative ions in the air. Those make us feel good. They affect our physiology. Whereas where there's a hot, dry wind, like in a desert area, in Little Yosemite Valley, where it's very dry, there'll be a lot of positive ions in the air. Those affect our physiology negatively. And where there's these winds, like the Santa Ana winds, for example, and every culture has a different name for this phenomenon, people will feel ill at ease, they'll feel grouchy, they'll get into more fights, more accidents, and more people show up in the emergency room where there's these positive ions in the air. So waterfalls, you get a lot of negative ions, so I consider that part of the vortex effect, the electricity in the air. Niagara is a wonderful example of waterfall for the reason that at night they shine colored lights on the froth, the foam in the air. There's tons of water actually that just fills the air, and they're shining colored lights on it. It's very beautiful. And you can also breathe in this colored air, yes? So that is a wonderful way to do color therapy. You can, of course, visualize that the air you're breathing in is of certain colors, whatever color feels most healing for you at the moment. But at Yosemite, they actually light up the mist with colored lights. So I love that vortex there, Yosemite, and how they light it up with color. So that, that's three different elements at least of the vortex effect around waterfalls.
It's very interesting how that works. And Adnome again was asking another question. What does Dan know about the UFO sightings in these places, and what does he think the connection is?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for asking that question. Part of what led me on this track in my life is that at the age of 14, a UFO turned on its lights for me. And I'm here at the Montana Vortex. Here we're at a pass in a mountain range. We're at the very extreme end of one of the mountain ranges, the Flatiron Mountains. We get UFO sightings here quite frequently. I'm told, now I haven't seen or an obvious UFO here myself, but the other folks here are telling me that they're seeing lights around the mountain quite regularly. So this begs the question, why do UFOs need lights? Okay, so I'm put that question out to your audience. Why do UFOs need lights? Here's apparently an advanced civilization with advanced technology. What do they need light for? Aren't they able to use remote sensing and other kinds of frequencies outside of the visible range? Well, one of the reasons that UFO may need lights is to communicate with us, to communicate essentially so that the receiver doesn't need technology, right? We can see them with the naked eye. So in my experience, I had a UFO sighting where it was clear to me that the UFO was turning on its lights so that I could see it. There was a pattern of lights for just a second or two, but to me, in hindsight now, it's many years ago, it seemed to me that they were turning on their lights so that I could see them. So what's the relationship of lights to vortexes? At the time, I didn't associate my UFO sighting with vortex per se. But if I'm right, that part of the signature of a vortex is that it has it's an electromagnetic anomaly, then it is possible that UFOs are using these, they're essentially seeing with electromagnetic eyes. Maybe this species actually has sight that is broader than ours. It's not just a visible sight, but as we think of it, but perhaps they're able to actually see more of the electromagnetic spectrum. So maybe when they look at a vortex, it actually shows up visibly. That's one possibility. Another is that vortexes, they're using the vortexes, these electromagnetic hotspots, so to speak, as kind of a beacon or markers. Just like we, use markers to mark the USGS, the Geological Survey, puts survey markers in, okay, this is our base point for doing the rest of our survey. So maybe the UFOs are navigating by these electromagnetic vortexes. There was a researcher some time ago, an airline pilot in New Zealand named Bruce Cathie, Cathie, and he wrote a number of books, and his entree into the field of vortexes and what I call the Earth grid was that he was plotting UFO sightings, and he found that there were clusters of UFO sightings at certain points, and so that's what led him to develop kind of an Earth grid. Now, Bruce Cathie's grid was actually a cubic grid based on the cube. I published a couple vortex maps, not of my own design exactly, but one that's quite well known, I reprinted, called the Earth Star Globe. Many readers will be familiar with it, or listeners, because there are a number of books featuring the Earth Star Globe. That's a little bit of different grid. It's based on the geometry of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron. And I may be going a little far afield, but I will say there is plenty of evidence to suggest that there is a correspondence between these vortex points and UFO sightings, and different researchers will have different ideas about why that might be. So there are a number of, I think, plausible hypotheses on why that would be, and also that these vortexes may be portals, and so the UFOs are using them essentially to teleport or to have instant transportation between two distant points.
It's interesting to try to think about how it actually works and try to figure that out. You can think about it all day or all week even. But let's see, Jason had a question, and he says, if a glacier retreats in one place, does that area of land increase in elevation? Then does opposite side of planet develop a depression?
Okay. That's thank you for that question. It is true for sure that as the glacier retreats, it releases pressure on the Earth, and the Earth does rebound. In other words, it will increase in elevation. That's what I was describing with the granite in the Sierra Nevadas and in Yosemite. As the glaciers retreated, as that pressure was released, there is a change in elevation. The elevation does increase over time when the glaciers retreat. I don't think you'd see that a direct correspondence on the other side of the Earth. If I may, Tessa, I'd like to explicitly state kind of the through line here. I love doing interviews. You've got great questions, but I think sometimes what gets lost is essentially the through line. In other words, the thread that's connecting everything. So I'll just briefly repeat what I consider to be the core, for me, the core of the Vortex research that connects everything. And that is this, that there's an infinite amount of energy available everywhere, all the time, for our physical healing, our psychic opening, and for harmonizing the planet. And if I may repeat that again, there's an infinite amount of energy available everywhere, all the time, for our physical healing, our psychic opening, and for harmonizing the planet.
It's good to know. Greg in the chat room was asking, does Dan think a vortex has anything to do with crop circles?
Okay, thanks for that question. To me, it is plausible to me, since I have had a UFO sighting, it's plausible to me that it is UFOs involved in creating the crop circles. For me, the crop circles are very much similar to the UFO sighting that I had. In other words, that momentary time when that UFO turned on its lights for me was, it was a gentle waking up to the possibility of these other beings, paranormal experiences, other dimensions, etc. And I think the crop circles for many people act in a similar way. It's a kind of a gentle prodding to wake up to greater possibilities. Yes, now, because of my study of vortexes, I do believe that it is also possible that the patterns that we're seeing in the crops may be generated by the Earth itself. Again, the Earth itself is divine and conscious, and I think it's possible that the Earth energies themselves create these exquisite geometric patterns.
And Kat was wondering, do you think that psychic abilities are connected to the energy field from the Earth or the magnetic field? Are they tied together in any way, do you think?
I believe they are. I'm just making a note here, and I'll just ask you to just restate the question, just as you did.
Okay. She says, Kat is wondering if psychic's abilities are tied to Earth's magnetic field.
Yeah. That is part of my premise here, that the electromagnetic field of the Earth, that there's an energy which you could think of as an electromagnetic energy, a geophysical energy, or a vortex energy that is available to us wherever we are, and that this energy does somehow contribute to our psychic abilities. So vortexes are places where our psychic abilities are heightened, our intentions and our prayers are empowered. And so very often vortexes are places which are remote. They're relatively untrampled by human beings. I sometimes like to call them islands of infinity, where the electromagnetic field is still relatively pure and you could say not polluted by a lot of man-made electromagnetic fields. The human-made electromagnetic fields, in effect the electromagnetic pollution, has, in my opinion, got to inhibit our psychic abilities so that when we're out in places that are relatively quiet in terms of the electromagnetic field, in other words, not a lot of man-made EMFs, then we'll be more in touch with our psychic abilities, and those places will enhance our psychic abilities. So that's a yes. Simply yes.
Good answer. Greg is wondering, well, that was the one that we already asked. Kat was also wondering, in the Montana vortex, have you tried a Jacob's ladder in it?
Jacob's ladder being the Tesla device where you see that beautiful electrical charge running up the two different, I think, electrodes? And no, I haven't. If I'm right about, is that what they mean by Jacob's ladder? Because I can kind of picture that it's that Tesla device where there's a charge going between the two different poles. And no, I can't say that I have. There's all kinds of research that we would love to do more research here. We're pretty busy leading tours throughout the day, every day, and we are a little short-handed for tour guides this summer. If any of your listeners might be interested in guiding tours at the Montana Vortex next summer, and they're good public speakers, I would totally encourage them to get in touch with the folks here at the Montana Vortex, and that's montanavortex.com. But I would ask for a follow-up question on that, like, why does that listener ask that question? I'm curious.
It takes a few seconds to
Sure.
respond, as we're probably about 10 or so ahead of them.
Okay, that's all right.
Could you re-ask that to her, just so she gets it?
Oh, sure. I'm just curious why that person asked that question. At the Vortex, let me kind of reframe in a way. At the Vortex, we are looking for any kind of scientific experiment that will help us to better understand what we're seeing here. Now, one of the kind of signature phenomenon that we see here is that we put two people on a perfectly level platform, face to face, a couple feet apart. One person seems to be on one side of a line of energy and the other person on the other side. When we look at them, when we take a photograph, the person on one side appears taller than when they stand on the other side. Of course, if you've got two people face to face and they're close to eye and they switch places, it's very dramatic kind of a result. So what we're seeing may be purely visual, or it may actually be physical, because remember, our bodies are made up of millions and trillions of molecules, and those are mostly empty space. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that the vortex energy is actually compressing the empty space between our molecules. Or it may be purely visual, we're not quite sure which. But it's plausible that that line of energy, in effect, it's concave. You can think of it as a sphere or a bubble of energy, so that the interface is actually concave, much like a lens. And of course, we know lenses bend light. And you can think of the idea of refraction. Refraction meaning if you have a clear vase with some water in it and you put in a flower, the stem of the flower is going to look discontinuous. It's going to look broken at the interface between the air and the water. I think we're all familiar with that kind of phenomenon, refraction.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes a good analogy. I'm not sure if it's a perfect analogy, but it's a good analogy for why we might be seeing a person looking taller on one side of this line of energy and shorter on the other. So there's a number of experiments that we would love to have done. One of them is called Schleimann photography, and you can set up a laser and a camera in such a way that you can actually see different densities in the air. And Schleimann, I think, is going to be spelled Schleimann. Schleimann photography involves a laser so that you can actually see the different density in the air. And we would love to see that done here to see whether or not the air is actually denser on one side of the interface than the other.
And Kat came back and said because vortexes are energy-based and the latter should disrupt its properties, and she also said it's an energy experiment to get new readings. Just a different take on another experiment you could possibly do.
Okay. All right. We do find that it is possible to disrupt this energy. In other words, we first of all, we feel that it is a natural phenomenon. It's something that is in the Earth. There is a vortex researcher who, my friend Doug, who wrote Gravitational Mystery Spots. And Doug believes that if we did dig, which no pun intended, if we excavated at the vortex, we might find that there was some kind of technology buried here. If UFOs have the ability to, let's say, have you ever heard of UFOs just flying out of the ocean or into the ocean?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can imagine some kind of a vehicle going at tremendous speeds and just flying right into the ocean, they would have to have some kind of technology that we're not aware of in order to, fly right into the ocean. That would be, that would destroy many kinds of vehicles would just be destroyed flying at high speeds into the water. But people who have sighted these report that there's no disruption of the water at all. So my friend Doug believes that possibly there's some kind of technology underground, but I would say I believe that it's just a natural phenomenon. Nonetheless, we do find that crystals and magnets have the potential to disrupt this natural vortex energy. So now that's along the lines of the subject of my book, Stonehenge Gardening Tips, where I look at ancient monuments, in particular Stonehenge, but not just Stonehenge, other kinds of ancient monuments as well, and how these ancient monuments were built with energetic materials, whether it's granite or quartz crystal or whatever it might be, in such a way as to manipulate the earth energies. And I would say the ancient monuments, such as Stonehenge, probably had many different functions. And in permaculture, we talk about stacking functions. In other words, if you're going to have a fish pond, if you're going to have a chicken coop, if you're going to have a worm bin, etc. Some things provide shade, some things have a single function. In permaculture, we talk about stacking functions. The ancient monuments probably had many different functions, but one of them might have been to help make the earth more fertile, to make crops and livestock more fertile, to make people healthier, to energize water. Yes, so quartz crystal, magnets, other kinds of materials do have an impact on the vortex and could actually disrupt or change the vortex. So it is possible that the Jacob's Ladder would influenced the vortex. In fact, there's a Bigfoot researcher in Southern Oregon, well, formerly in Southern Oregon, Matthew Johnson, whom I've met, excuse me, seems a very credible Bigfoot researcher, even though his stories just get more and more amazing as you go. Matthew Johnson had an experience where a fellow named Stephen brought an electromagnetic device, in fact a Tesla device, a kind of an over-unity electromagnetic motor, you could say. Stephen brought this Tesla device to a location, and when he turned on the device, it actually acted as a shunt, in a certain sense. It acted to open up a channel or a portal, which allowed, according to Matthew, it allowed, I think, more than 1,000 Bigfoot to come to the Earth from their planet where they were trapped. They were trapped on a dying planet, and it was a Tesla device that allowed, that enabled this portal to open up so that the Bigfoot could come through to Earth.
And I have heard that aspect from different people. Perhaps they are coming from portals and going into portals or vortexes or vortices to make Rano happy, because they do disappear so quickly, and nobody can ever find them.
Well, I wouldn't say nobody.
Well, if they have, like, we don't have the evidence of it. You know, I've seen different videos. One guy supposedly has a Bigfoot head in his freezer that his dad or his grandfather had found, and they've kept it frozen all this time. But you know, we get those pictures, and generally they're blurry because they're either so quick moving or perhaps it is a ghost of a Bigfoot. But it's hard to really pin down that evidence.
It is hard to pin down, for sure. Apparently there is some relic of a Yeti in a monastery in Nepal. Of course, there are legends of Bigfoot all over the world, and the Native Americans have legends of Bigfoot, and I think many different Native American nations have legends of Bigfoot. In the Yosemite area, the Native Americans actually have an oral history of one of the Indians killing a Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot taking retribution and killing an entire branch of the tribe of Native Americans. The Bigfoot they likely have, they're bigger than we are. They likely have a more powerful aura or electromagnetic field. They may be able to, and you know, I'm repeating what other researchers have told me. For example, Matthew Johnson, Joe Hauser, who's the owner of the Montana Vortex, is a Bigfoot researcher as well. They may use their aura, their electromagnetic field, to cloak themselves, and they may be able to move between dimensions, and so that might explain why the photographs seem blurry or not quite in this dimension. Okay, and so it does seem plausible to me that the Bigfoot exists not fully in this dimension, or they are able to travel between dimensions, and so that may explain why they're able to so quickly disappear. And there's stories of like footprints in the snow that kind of end. They just come to an end, or Bigfoot turning into an orb.
Oh wow! I haven't heard that one, but that's an interesting perspective. Kevin in the chat room is wondering, are vortices affected by orbit of the moon?
Well, as the moon orbits the Earth, creates the tides, the ocean tides and also continental tides, and those create cyclic pressures on the continental plates, and those plates are full of quartz crystal, and so there's these cycles of piezoelectricity from the quartz crystals throughout the day as the Earth orbits around the moon. And of course, at certain points in the moon cycle, we get eclipses where we get extremes in gravity because of the alignment of the moon with the sun. Here at the Montana Vortex, they have a weight that's hanging on a chain. Yeah? And as you pull the weight in one direction, away from the center of the vortex, the weight seems heavier. And as you pull the weight towards the center of the vortex, in a similar fashion, the weight seems lighter than when you pull it away. Gravity is not just measured up and down. This is hard science now. Because the moon orbits around the Earth throughout the day, the center of gravity, the center of mass of the Earth, is actually orbiting around inside of the Earth throughout the day. So scientists measure gravity not only not only up and down, but also left and right, so to speak. So in other words, in all three axes, X, Y, and Z axes. So the moon cycles do seem to contribute to the vortex effect.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it really affects so many different things, such as the tides and whatnot. Let's see, Robert White was asking, all the way from Australia, is Dan able to open or close the portals at his own will?
Well, I wouldn't go that far in that. I don't make that claim. I've had some miraculous experiences for sure, but I can't say that I've been able to see these portals myself. And I generally take a pretty hands-off approach to these things. There are people out there who are doing what I call grid work, where they're directly working. And this is kind of our end game in a way, as geomancers or as students of alchemy. The whole point is very much like doing earth acupuncture. I think this is a very good analogy, in fact, acupuncture. You could think of the lines of energy, the lines of earth energy as being like acupuncture meridians, and the vortexes as being similar to acupuncture points. And so this is the why question. Answers are, why should we study vortexes? And I did address that earlier with physical healing, psychic opening, and harmonizing the planet. In other words, the more we understand about how these natural phenomena are working, the better we're able to work with them rather than against them, yes? So if we understand that vortexes carry energies and that sometimes they may be blocked, just like acupuncture meridians, then we can intervene to help balance or harmonize these things. But I generally am very cautious about that. Other grid workers are more actively out there doing what they call balancing, or different researchers use different words. But until I feel that I've got a really clear view of what's going on out of Vortex, I'm not about to intervene by placing crystals or organite or any such device. I just don't feel, I feel that the energy field is already overlaid with many, many layers of people's beliefs and emotions, and so I'm very cautious about doing ceremony to influence the vortexes. Other people are more active in that than I am.
Jason is wondering, how are we, or how do we read the energy around a vortex?
Hmm. Okay, well, there are any number of ways to identify a vortex. In other words, some people are actually able to see these energies. Different people see them in different ways. Some people are able to feel the energies. I often feel a tingling in my face, sometimes jaw, sometimes the third eye. Sometimes for people, the hair stands up on their arms. It seems that different people sense these things in different ways. You can actually see plants growing in unusual ways. Trees such as the redwoods that don't usually spiral may spiral out of vortex. Plants that normally spiral in a right-hand direction may be spiraling in a left-hand direction. Plants that normally have 3 branches at a node may have 4, 5, 6 branches at a node. The plants may all be growing, trees may grow in a spiral. You can actually see these things from air photos. You'll see circles and half circles. Very often they're 54 miles in diameter. And because roads tend to follow mountains and rivers, you can actually spot these things even from very low resolution maps like a road atlas. You may be able to see these vortexes 54 miles wide. And I did publish a little booklet called U.S. Vortexes 54 Miles Wide, where I identify probably 9 or 10 different vortexes in the U.S. that happen to be 54 miles wide. I'll just mention one in particular I'm quite fond of. In Bend, Oregon, at the center of town, there's a butte. I believe it's called Airport Butte, but I sometimes mix it up. It might be Pilot Butte. The top of this butte, first of all, you drive up to the top, you spiral up, the road spirals up to the top, you get up to the top, there's a mountain identifier, a plaque that shows what the mountains are out in the horizon, out in the distance. And when you get up to the top of that butte, you look at that mountain identifier, what you'll notice is that in all directions there's mountains 27 miles distant. In other words, it's the center of one of these 54-mile vortexes. So you can see them from air photos, you can see them on maps, how the plants are growing, and you can also sense them directly.
So is there any, as far as compasses or a millimeter, is there any way to pick it up that way? Does a compass act weird around a vortex?
Yeah.
Would a millimeter pick up a differentiation in the energy field?
What kind of meter was that, though?
A millimeter?
I'm not sure what kind of meter. How do you spell that?
M-E-L.
No. I'm not familiar with that, but I will say for sure that, like I say, the USGS does identify a magnetic hotspot here at Columbia Falls where there is the Montana vortex. The Santa Cruz mystery spot is close to a magnetic high in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and there does seem to be a correspondence with vortexes with magnetic anomalies. If you get an air chart, an aeronautic chart from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, still issues charts that show magnetic disturbances because airline pilots used to navigate by magnetic compass. So those air charts or aeronautic charts will show little rectangles, and in the rectangle it'll say magnetic disturbance of as much as X degrees exists at ground level or at sea level, and that way pilots would know when their compass diverged from magnetic north, they would be able to adjust for that. So on the ground, a magnetic compass will spin at certain times and places. It'll just flat out, it'll spin. And the magnetic north will seem to vary from the marked declination. In other words, we have geographic north, which is the North Pole, and we have magnetic north. So we've got two kinds of north. We've got geographic and magnetic. Wherever you are, There's a difference between magnetic and geographic. That's called the declination. You can find that marked on maps. And at the Vortex, we find that the compass does diverge, sometimes diverges from the marked declination.
And Robert White was so kind to put this into the chat room. The Melmeter offers both single-axis AC magnetic field measurement and real-time air temperature readings. Display illumination is red, so it doesn't saturate your eyes when working in dark areas. Readout in mg or UT, Fahrenheit and Celsius, high resolution and fast response. Basic 1-inch K-type thermocouple is included, and it can be used with a variety of commercially available thermocouple probes for extended temperature ranges. Solves the age-old problem of how do I hold all this stuff? And someone else was also saying an EMF meter. More people are keen to that meter as opposed to the Melmeter.
We'll definitely have to look into the Melmeter there. That's of definite interest. I'm not sure how temperature plays in.
Yeah, sometimes when you encounter paranormal or other things, it does have a temperature change. But on that note, we do have to go to our second break, if you can believe that, and we'll be right back after these messages. You guys don't go anywhere.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens, or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our Advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Looking for nighttime adventure? Old school radio that delves into everything out of the norm. Then check us out at Spaced Out Radio. This is Dave Scott. Every Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we're going to take you on a wild ride ranging from conspiracies to true crime and every ghost, alien, and Sasquatch story in between. We're always live, and we're always interactive with you. So join us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, we own the night.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month, where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Tonight's show and topic of discussion do not necessarily reflect the opinion of Spaced Out Radio, SOR Media, or its hosts. Listener discretion is advised. It's hour number 3 of Spaced Out Sunday with host Tessa Nicole Thomas. Follow Tessa on Twitter at TessaTNT. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now back to the Rocky Mountains. Here's Tessa.
Hey guys, welcome back. So great to have you. In the third hour, we are taking calls. Our phone number is 970-335-9596. 970-335-9596 if you guys have any questions for Dan. Dan, welcome back. Thanks so much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure, Tessa. Thank you.
All right, so did we finish our thought on that last question, or should we move on to another one? What are your thoughts on that?
I was just taking a look at the Mel meter online, and it does raise the idea of, well, the temperature idea. Here at the Montana Vortex, we do have a spot, we call it the aura spot, where there's this beautiful spiral of trees, where we take a couple minutes to teach people how to see and feel the field of energy around our bodies. Seems that it's super easy. Nearly everyone in just a couple of minutes is able to either see or feel this energy around the body, the aura energy. But everybody feels it in different ways and sees it in different ways too. In general, the way that we see the aura energy is in the same way that people are able to see these 3D posters, the magic eye posters. They're nothing but dots, but when you gaze at them, they pop up into 3D. And the way we see our aura is just the same. In other words, there's a magic in gazing. And when you hold your hand out in front of you and you spread your finger wide, you spread your fingers wide, and you gaze out into the distance past your hand, noticing the spaces between your fingers, very often people are able to see this field of energy around their hand. Often it just looks like kind of a hazy outline, sometimes light, sometimes dark. Some people see it as colors. Then we have people take a comfortable stance. For a quick second, they rub their palms together. Then they hold their palms an inch or two apart. And then we begin to rotate our hands almost as though you're rolling a Nerf ball, a foam ball between your hands. And people then often, most everybody can feel like a slight magnetic push and pull between their hands. Maybe a third of the people feel the energy as a magnetic push and pull. Another third of the people, generally, feel that as a little tingling, like an electrical staticky, pins and needles, almost like your hands falling asleep. The other third of the people feel it as warm or cool. Warm or cool. So it may be like the Mel meter is one of the things it's measuring is temperature, yes? And people get this sensation of a change in temperature when there's this paranormal activity or spirits, you could say, right? It may be that it's, and I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to suggest that it's a perception that people have of this coolness or warmth even. And that just may be a way that people sense the energy. It's not necessarily inherent in the phenomena itself, if you follow me. In other words, other people may feel it differently. Some may feel it as temperature. Others may feel it as something else. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation about the Mel meter, or the temperature, measuring the changes in temperature. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of electromagnetic fields, I think of electromagnetic fields being generally of two types. One would be the natural electromagnetic field, like the geophysical energies, and the other would be man-made electromagnetic fields. And some kinds of meters are designed, for example, the tri-field meter, or the original tri-field meter, designed to measure man-made electromagnetic fields, where you might need a different kind of device to measure the natural electromagnetic fields.
Kevin in the chat room is saying, as far as using energy devices, the only person that I know that has used a device to detect the energies given off by ley lines was a scientist at the Great Pyramid of Giza when they placed a makeshift conduit atop the pyramid to see if you give off energy signatures. He had designed a device that was ultra-sensitive to minutely small energy fields. He did find such a field given off by the pyramid. The conduit top was removed, and they were never given permission to place it back on again for testing. It'd be interesting to know who that scientist was. That's pretty interesting.
I would definitely like to have the name and the citation for that. But there is some research that's just recently come out that, I mean, I've seen it just in the last couple of days on Facebook and elsewhere, that shows that the pyramids do seem to concentrate electromagnetic energies. So that's, I think, I need to look into that farther, but it does it seems to confirm what we all kind of intuitively already knew. Now, I will say this, that there was an industrialist named Siemens, Siemens, and the Siemens family is still making electric and electronic devices, right? The Siemens company, Siemens. Well, the original fellow went to the pyramids in Egypt, and at the time when you could still climb the pyramids, climbed to the top of the pyramids, and he felt that he could feel the electrical charge in the air. And again, hard science, electrical potential does increase with elevation. So Siemens made a makeshift device using a wine bottle that was partially filled with liquid and I think wrapped with a non-conductive material, if I'm right. And it did build up an electrical charge, and the story is that he touched his guide, and the guide got such a shock from it that he ran off in terror.
Yeah.
So there's, it's definitely clear that there is an electrical charge that increases with elevation, and there seems to be some research showing that the shape of the pyramid, the materials do concentrate electromagnetic energies. That seems to be pretty well confirmed hard science.
Yeah, and Kevin in the chat room was saying one of the parts of the Mel meter is an EMF, which there's a separate meter known as an EMF, but it's kind of, just a combination of the EMF and the temperature and whatnot. So it, like he was saying earlier, or Robert was saying earlier, it cuts down on how many tools you have to carry as far as meters go.
Sure.
But what you were saying about the wine brings me back to Jason's comment or question, and he was wondering, do vortices affect liquids?
Well, there's definitely an interplay between, and again, my focus, my emphasis is on the geophysical energies, the earth energies, and the electromagnetic fields. And there's definitely a correlation between these tourist attractions that are open, the genuine vortexes that are open as tourist attractions, and nearby bodies of water. Here at the Montana Vortex, we are right on the banks of the Flathead River, just as the river comes out of Glacier Park and through the Bad Rock Gorge. Right on the other side of the gorge, there are two forks of the Flathead coming together. And where you have, and this is an important point, I feel. Water carries an electrical charge in the wild, in nature. It has minerals dissolved in it. It definitely carries an electrical charge. And so each branch of the Flathead has a different electrical signature. And where they're coming together, you then get kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 effect. You get these two different water currents, these two different electrical currents coming together and creating a more complex and third and different kind of an electrical field. Now let's take a look for a moment at the Bermuda Triangle. This is probably the poster child for vortexes all over the world, the Bermuda Triangle. Again, there are dozens of components of the electromagnetic field wherever you are. In the ocean, you have salt water. That carries an electrical current, salt water. At different layers of the ocean, you have different temperatures and salinity, saltiness, and density. So if you were to actually take a column of seawater and lift it up out of the ocean like a cross-section of seawater, what you would see is that it's different currents of seawater flowing in different directions at different depths, and each of them have unique properties and electrical properties. So you get a very complex picture, a very complex electromagnetic field out over the ocean. Right at the surface of the ocean, you have waves breaking, there's salt in the air, and that salt water just above the surface of the ocean also carries an electrical charge. So among the other things going on there at the Bermuda Triangle, you've got a very complex picture in all the different layers of ocean. Water, like air, is very laminar. In other words, like laminate, many different layers. And so where those layers interact, you have an even more complex electric picture there. So definitely a relationship, and as I mentioned earlier, there are numerous applications for energizing or structuring water using energetic materials or natural energy fields such as vortexes. And the applications would have to do with healing and also with making crops more fertile. And that's been well established. I think I mentioned last time a book called, and I might have mixed up the title because I do this, Stones of Knowledge, Seed of Plenty, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a fellow who was researching what he called ionic cascades. In other words, taking seeds and bombarding them with electrical ions and then testing to see what kinds of stimulation of these seeds created better plants. And he went on to study the pyramids and found that effectively it was the same phenomena where these indigenous people would bring their seeds, before they planted, they would bring their seed to the pyramids and leave their seeds at the pyramids for a certain period of time, and that they would get better crops because of the electric stimulation of the seeds.
Science is so interesting. It was one of my favorite subjects in school. But yeah, there's so many things like you can decipher and figure out, using different tools. Joe Monk came in and asked, "Can you toss a cat through a vortex?" I'm sure you can, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Cats are very sensitive to energies. As I said before, they're like little antennae. They're very sensitive to energies, and people who own cats will know that the cat has a certain knack for picking out the most annoying spot in the room.
Yeah.
On some level, it's like whatever has the most energy for you, they will come lay on your computer keyboard, or they will. But watch where cats hang out. They'll hang out in the spot. It'll happen to have good sight lines, and they'll hang out in energy spots. And I personally live with a cat. And I very much wish that I could throw him through a vortex at times.
Especially when you're trying to sleep. I feel you there, for real. Robert was saying there are 11 other triangles that cover the Earth. Each are as powerful as the Bermuda version.
Oh, okay, absolutely right. But I'll just reframe that just a little bit. The Bermuda Triangle is one of 12, you could say, points around the Earth that are geometrically spaced, including the North and South Pole. So North and South Pole, and then 10 points around, not exactly on the equator, but around the equatorial region. And these are in the shape of the icosahedron. Okay, the icosahedron is one of the platonic solids. You have the cube, the tetrahedron, the icosahedron, the dodecahedron, and the octahedron. So the Earth grid, the so-called Earth grid, is a combination of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron. And one version of that is the map that I published called the Earth Star Globe, that you can see at my website, vortexmaps.com. So it comes flat, and then you can fold it up into a globe. So there are these 12 points. The Bermuda Triangle is actually, it's a triangular-shaped area, but I wouldn't say that the 12 triangles, well, the icosahedron is 12 triangles that cover the globe, yes. The Bermuda Triangle, though, is one of 12 triangles, but to be precise, those don't exactly cover the globe. In other words, the Bermuda Triangle is smaller than the triangles of the icosahedron. It's hard to describe fully in words. It's very visual, so I do encourage your listeners to go to vortexmaps.com to see that. And at this point, I'll also mention that if your listeners will send me an email via my website, my email address is actually ask, like ask a question, ask at danshaw.com. DANSHAW, ask at danshaw.com. Anybody who sends me an email, I'll send them a free ebook.
That's awesome. That's a very good trade, I must say. So Kevin, go ahead.
Well, there's much more to be said about the Bermuda Triangle, of course, and how it is one of 12 points that are equidistant around the globe. They're geometrically spaced around the globe, and so yes, the Bermuda Triangle is just one of 12 if you include the North and South Pole. Yeah.
Okay, and then Kevin was asking, are the vortices responsible for the hexagon clouds that are found above the Bermuda Triangle?
Oh, gosh. Now, I'm not specifically familiar with the hexagon clouds above the Bermuda Triangle. However, we do find that on Earth and on other planets, there are manifestations of the geometric points that are perfectly visible. In other words, at the tetrahedra points, and we touched on this last time, if you inscribe a tetrahedra in the Earth, the tetrahedron is like a pyramid, but all the faces are equilateral triangles. So there are 4 equilateral triangles in a tetrahedron. You inscribe that in the Earth, one point at the North Pole, the other points come out at approximately 19.5 degrees south latitude. You flip the tetrahedron, one point at the South Pole, the others come out at 19.5 approximately degrees north latitude. And when you look at the globe, when you look at a map, you'll see that there are some significant features at that latitude, including the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaiian Islands are a manifestation, a visible sign of a hot spot in Earth's core. In other words, in the molten part of the core of the Earth, there's a stable hot spot at 19.5 degrees latitude. So that's a manifestation of the tetrahedron. Richard Hoagland talks about the 19.5 in terms of the architecture on Mars. It's Cydonia. I believe that Hoagland is maybe not 100% correct, but definitely onto something. I do believe that there are some architectural, in other words, unnatural, man-made, you could say, features on Mars at the tetrahedral geometry point. And isn't it Saturn that has that hexagonal feature at the North Pole? And the red spot on Jupiter, I believe, which it's a massive gaseous planet, but that red spot, also massive, is approximately at 19.5 degrees. So there are manifestations of these geometric points, upwellings of energy that you see on Earth and on other planets. And if, I would love for your listener to send me the documentation on the hexagonal clouds over the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, he had followed up with, the hexagon clouds are only found above the Bermuda Triangle. They are photographed by the U.S. weather satellites. Factuals objects.
Far out. And it does seem clear, too, that the continental plates show a hexagonal structure. And I do have some information about that on my website as well. The seismic or tectonic plates of the continents. But we shouldn't be surprised. Everything in nature has a geometry to it. It just sometimes takes a scientist or a visionary to recognize geometry at that planetary scale.
Yeah, it's very interesting, when clouds do change their form, and depending on what area, if that is the only area, I'm definitely going to check it out after the show. Bill Hauser was mentioning the Dragon Triangle, which is very well known. What are your thoughts on this area?
Well, that one I don't know. He may be talking about the Devil's Triangle in Japan? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Dragon Triangle. That's got kind of an Asian feel to it. But this would be one of the 12 points that includes the Bermuda Triangle. And the Bermuda Triangle, we talked about a little bit about it last time. I won't repeat myself, but it does seem that geometry plays an important part in vortexes. In other words, at the vortex itself, we may see certain geometries. Where there are ancient monuments, these ancient monuments often involve very elegant geometries. I mean, the Great Pyramid being just one. And then we find that there are geometric relationships between these vortex points and geometric relationships between these ancient monuments. And I believe that part of the reason that may be brings us back to the science of antennas and broadcasting frequencies. And when we broadcast frequencies from a single point, the waveform can be relatively unstable, or even from 2 points. We may get when we broadcast a frequency from 2 points, that may be less stable than if we were to broadcast from 3 points. If you broadcast a frequency from 3 points, then you'll get a very stable waveform. Where 2 frequencies interact, we talked about binaural beats and how 2 frequencies interact to produce a third frequency. Here we're kind of coming back to that subject where 2 frequencies interact, they tend to either amplify each other or cancel each other out. So, and certain channels, I think Cryon talks about this as well, that there'll be 3 types of vortexes. Essentially, one where the 2 types of frequencies have constructive interference. In other words, they add to each other. There'll be a point where they have destructive interference. In other words, they cancel each other out. And then there'll be a third type of vortex point, which will essentially be in the negative range. So it's like you have a plus, a 0, and a negative type of vortex. You could say positive, neutral, and negative, plus, 0, and minus. Different researchers use different words to describe these things. You could call it electric and magnetic and electromagnetic. Just depends on your jargon.
And I was just putting the number out there again for you guys if you'd like to call in. It's 970-335-9596.
Sure appreciate all these questions. It definitely gives us a whole different playground to play in. Takes us into a different areas than our first interview.
Yeah, for sure, and I definitely like the different perspectives and different thought forms. You know, we can't think of everything, so it's nice to get everyone's input and questions in here. Adnome Solar Rocker was wondering, how well does a pendulum work in a vortex?
Well, quite well indeed. And people are able to measure vortexes in a similar way to how people dowse for water, how people find where to drill a well to find water. Some people use a couple of bent rods, maybe brass or copper rods. Some people use a forked stick, and some people use a pendulum. Some people need no device at all. It's called deviceless dowsing. Sometimes it's called water witching when you're dowsing for water. Of course, people can dowse for ore and mineral deposits. You can dowse for lost items. And you can actually dowse to get answers to any sort of question, even emotional questions or questions about what nutrients or herbs might be best for you. Now, my co-author and fellow tour guide here, Nick Nelson, actually dowses using a magnet, but not just one magnet. He'll use a magnet at the end of a string, then he'll use a different magnet that is actually covered in aluminum foil, which is a non-magnetic material, right? And then he'll use the combination, both magnets together, and he gets a number of different results doing it that way. And what we find is that the pendulum will swing sometimes practically horizontal. I mean, the pendulum will just go wild at certain points in the vortex.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to take my dowsing rods to one and see what difference there is there. Because so much energy does come through when I use those, and I can only imagine what it would do in a vortex or a portal.
And I just want to compliment your listeners. I often find that the question and answer period after a presentation is just kind of all over the map, and your listeners have just asked fantastic questions every step of the way. The first interview, I felt the questions were really great, and again tonight. So thank you for your wonderful questions.
Indeed, these guys are great, and I just love where they're coming from, and it's so nice to have, such amazing questions and thoughts, and I love my paranormal family. They're awesome.
Right on.
And Kevin said he emailed you the link to, or about the hexagon clouds, so that'll be interesting. You should share that with me as well, because I'd love to check that out.
Sure, I'll end up posting that on a web page, which is essentially the best scientific confirmation of the vortex hypothesis. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So one question that I have, do you find that the paranormal is amped up or caused by a vortex, perhaps?
Well, for me, that's the very definition of a vortex. It's a place which contributes to paranormal phenomena. So there are also times that contribute to paranormal phenomena, as I say, the solstice, equinox, different parts of the moon cycle, eclipses. And so, yes, absolutely, there are certain times and certain places where it's very supportive for people to do their psychic practices, whether if you are wanting to develop psychic abilities. In the Transcendental Meditation movement, Maharishi called these the cities, or the God powers, and these include everything psychic, whether it's working with the elements of the wind, the water, fire, whether it's telekinesis, teleportation, telepathy, whatever psychic abilities that you are wanting to develop, then I encourage you to go to your local vortex. There are vortexes wherever you are. You don't have to go to the Bermuda Triangle or to Sedona, Arizona, or Mount Shasta. Wherever you are, find a spot that has sweet energy for you. Go there on the solstices and equinoxes and other holy days, and go there with the possibility, with the intention and the desire, and these places and these times will support you in developing those psychic abilities.
So do you find, is the vortex well, you already answered that, it's an active paranormal place. Does a vortex or can a vortex aid in physical and spiritual healing?
Absolutely, definitely yes, in my opinion. We are electromagnetic beings. Every cell depends on having a proper electric-magnetic field. The Earth is electric and magnetic. We are not separate. This is one of the principles of alchemy, that there is no separation. Full stop, period. There's no separation. There's no separation, Tessa, between you and me. There's no separation between you and the vortex. Your electromagnetic field is totally immersed in the electromagnetic field of the Earth. And I may be simplifying by saying electromagnetic, but our energy field is totally immersed in the energy field of the Earth. There's no separation. The electromagnetic field of the Earth, the energy field of the Earth, affects us, and we also affect it. It affects our physiology, it affects the water in our bodies, it affects every cell, it affects every cell of our brain. In every cell of your brain, there's a minute amount of magnetite. And in your sinuses, the area of the third eye, we have greater amounts of magnetite, and that could actually account for how we could have a magnetic sense, just like the birds and the bees and the fish have a magnetic sense that they use to sense Earth's magnetic field, to find their way around the Earth. We also have this possible mechanism, the magnetite in our brain and in our sinuses, possible mechanism for how we could also have an electromagnetic or magnetic sense. And again, everybody senses the vortex energy, the geophysical energies, everybody senses them differently, but I often get a tingling in my face, in my jaws, or in my third eye, as I move from one kind of energy field to another. Now, like a fish in water, if you're just in one spot, you're less likely to notice the energy field. You're more likely to notice it as you move from one energy field, from one type of energy to another. At that interface, that some people call a threshold, that's where you're kind of most likely to sense the energy, where there's a change in energy. And certainly these energies affect our psyche. They affect, and this is perhaps going to help explain why people get disoriented at the Bermuda Triangle, why people might fly in the wrong direction if they're flying an aircraft over the Bermuda Triangle. They might have hallucinations or lapses in judgment, because the electromagnetic fields do affect our perceptions.
So down here, Kevin is asking, let me scroll down, do places with large amounts of rare earth magnets contribute to vortices and similar crystals?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, now the rare earth materials, I guess we're talking about like neodymium, other types of materials that are used to make magnets. I'm not a geophysicist, so here at this point I'm not totally certain when we mine something like neodymium from the Earth, it will have a certain magnetic signature, yes, but then we put it through certain industrial processes to actually produce a neodymium magnet. The minerals themselves may not have as intense or as structured kind of a magnetic field until we actually put them through an industrial process. But wherever there are ores and minerals in the Earth, those do clearly affect the electromagnetic field, and this is how come we can prospect for, let's say, petroleum, gas deposits, using remote sensing from an airplane or from a satellite. It's because everywhere where there's an ore and mineral deposit, you will see a fluctuation in the electromagnetic field.
And yeah, I'm sorry, that question was from Jason, not Kevin. Just fixing my mistake there.
So I just want to continue on that line of thought then. Where we mine these minerals, where we pull gas out of the ground, where we pull gold out of the ground, where we pull crystals out of the ground, we are damaging the natural electromagnetic field of the Earth. If you believe, as I do, that the Earth is a divine and conscious being, then scraping away the surface of the Earth and pulling these minerals out is essentially just as though you scraped at your own body and dug out parts of your body. And it is disruptive to the energetic field of the Earth to do that. So it is of some great concern that we are damaging the electromagnetic field of the Earth by mining these ores and minerals. And in particular, we're looking at Yellowstone as being a hotspot under the continental crust where there is a massive pool of magma and the risk that eventually that Yellowstone will erupt in a catastrophic way, as it does periodically over geologic time. The eruption of the supervolcano at Yellowstone is a tremendous concern. And that pressure that's building up there can be released gently and without catastrophe if it's released in small amounts over long periods of time. But you can imagine where we're fracking, for example, where we're putting fluids in the ground under pressure in order to break up the rock, in order to pull out oil and gas, where we're testing bombs and this and that. These kinds of disruptive activities can actually close up the release valves for Yellowstone, for geysers, places like that. And then that would mean that it's all the more likely that when that pressure is released that it's going to be catastrophic. Now, in the past, we had herds of millions of buffalo roaming the plains in North America, and in times more ancient than that, we had other kind of megafauna, in other words, woolly mammoth and such. And where these herds of buffalo were roaming the plains, the actual pounding of their feet could have been an important part of balancing these energies. And today, drumming can be an important way of, in effect, recreating that harmonizing frequency.
Nice. And on that note, we actually have a caller here from area code 306. Who are we talking to?
excuse me, it's your best buddy, Ronald.
Hey, Ronald, how's it going?
Hello, Tessa, my Bessa.
It's so good
How
to
are
hear
ya?
from you. I'm good. Did you have a question?
I'd just like to say, well, not really a question per se at the moment. I just want to say hi to everybody that we all chat to. And it's kind of hard to tell what's going on with what happened with the ice age and things. Okay, my really weird question would be Egypt, there's pyramids built there, but wouldn't Egypt way back then have trees? And did they, take away all the forest and it ended up turning into a desert? That's a long time ago, but that's that's just a question I have in my mind. But anyways, it's just good to hear your voice, and hi to everybody out there.
So good to hear yours as well. Dan, could you answer that question for him?
I can definitely take a stab at that. Thanks for calling in the old-fashioned way so we could hear your voice.
Indeed.
In ancient times, it certainly seems clear that the area that we now think of as the Sahara Desert in Africa and in Egypt was once a very fertile crescent.
Dan, are you still there? I think I lost you. Well, it shows that Dan is still on the line. The time is still ticking, but I'm not able to hear his voice anymore. Well, that's unfortunate. Maybe I should try calling him back. I'm gonna hang up here. Gonna call him right back. I don't know. He could have been muted. For some reason, he just fell off, and maybe he wasn't hearing me either. Maybe it's that Montana Vortex getting in on the action. Oh, wrong number. Dan Shaw. There he is.
Hi.
Dan, are you there?
Oh, I'm here. Sorry about that, Tessa.
No worries. I was like, what happened? It must be the Montana Vortex.
And now we're just down to the last couple of minutes. So I'm just going to refer to my Egyptian Vortex research friend, Antoine Gigal. That's spelled Gigal. Gigal. And she's done quite a bit of research around the Egyptian pyramids with hydraulic features, waterways, and ancient harbors and such in the area of the Egyptian pyramids. So for sure, that area in Egypt and Africa was once much more green, fertile, and forested. And I'll also mention one of, if not the premier orgone researcher, James DeMeo, that's spelled D-E-M-E-O. He has the Orgone Biophysical Research Lab near my hometown, Ashland, Oregon. He's written a book called Saharasia. In other words, I'll spell it. It's S-A-H-A-R-A-S-I-A. It's a kind of a conflation of Sahara and Asia. Saharasia. It's a rather massive book which documents the desertification of the Sahara, and then the essentially the expulsion of the races there, how they became very warlike as their environment became less and less habitable and hospitable. So I can see we're closing into our last minutes here, and while we still have a good connection, I'll take the opportunity to thank you very much, Tessa, and your listeners for this opportunity to share my favorite subject. And I'll just again invite people to visit vortexmaps.com and to email me through ask@danshaw.com, and I would love to continue the conversation in that way. So
that'd be great.
Thanks very much for that. How shall we close?
Well, we actually have about 8 more minutes before we're done.
Okay.
So, can you tell us? Oh, go ahead.
I'm saying we can cover a lot of ground in 8 minutes. This is the lightning round. Let's go.
That's right. So can you tell us a bit about your most interesting experiences and knowledge you've gained researching these sacred places in the U.S. and abroad?
Wow, that's a tall order. Again, I came to Vortex research from my own unique path. I think everybody comes from their own unique path. And for me, I was studying alchemy with a channeled being who is an ascended master who used the name Father Andre. And so my interest broadly is in alchemy, physical immortality, and ascension. So for me, geomancy is one subset of alchemy, and I believe that by studying vortexes, that we can, it's part of the great work, or the great mysteries, let's say. And everybody has a different path to, I think, the same end, which is to the perfection of the physical body, the perfection of the psyche, merging all paths in the heart, and eventually leading to physical immortality, and beyond that into ascension. And for me, ascension is the dropping all limitations and then becoming infinite and merging with everything. In effect, taking our physical body with us, the physical body becoming infinite. So while I've been studying vortexes, it takes me into contact with all kinds of wonderful people. I'm continuously learning things. I'm always interested by something I don't completely understand. Are you still with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, thanks. My Skype interface just maybe. There we are. Okay. And so I have had many miraculous and paranormal experiences. I've studied with this being, Ascended Master Father Andre. I've studied transcendental meditation. I've been given a mantra. And I've received a sutra, which is a sutra for levitation. Levitation being one of the siddhis or God powers. It's not the TM sutra, but I have seen and experienced at least the beginning stages of levitation. And that happened for me during the harmonic convergence back in 1987, I believe it was. It was 86 or 87. And it was in 3 days in August 16, 17, and 18, I believe it was. And we're coming right up again on the anniversary of the harmonic convergence. And at that time, I was out of Vortex. I was in the Collegiate Range in Colorado. There's a mountain there called Mount Princeton, and there's a resort there, and I was there with a group of people. That's where I received the Levitation Sutra. And so it's definitely one of the high points of my life was at Mount Princeton during the harmonic convergence. And I was in a room full of people. We were all doing that Levitation Sutra, and that practice continues today in Fairfield, Iowa, at what used to be called, I'm not sure, I think its name has changed, but it used to be called Maharishi International University, MIU. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this. People sometimes ask me, what's the most powerful vortex in the world? Is it the Bermuda Triangle? Is it Sedona, Arizona? Maybe, Easter Island? I believe the most powerful vortex in the world is our own heart. In our blood, we have iron. That's a magnetic mineral. It's vortexing and spiraling through our heart. And we are the most powerful vortex in the world. So wherever you are, you don't have to go to a vortex. You, in effect, you are the vortex.
That's awesome. I like that take on that. I really do like that. That's a very nice take on vortices and portals. I find it hard to say vortexes anymore because Ron is just, stabbed it into my head like, it's a vortices.
Whatever you prefer. If you want to sound more scientific, say vortexes. Say vortices. And I've just chosen to be, my job is, I think, as a popularizer. So, as a popularizer, I prefer the more common, I think, more American-sounding vortexes.
Yeah, and I think more people, being layman's or whatnot would
there you go.
Most likely pick it up. And, when you say vortices, they might, draw a blank. What is that? So I think it speaks to more people, like you were saying, as, our language. I don't know if it's digressing or if people are just, grasping onto newer words and adding things in there. But it is good to have that common ground with people and a better understanding for them, an easier way for them to grasp it.
Yeah, we all have our little pet peeves, and for me, it's when people say mediums when they really mean media. That one I think better to say media, unless you're talking about psychic mediums.
Yeah, I was talking to someone last week, and I just lost my train of thought. It was another word that I was using. Maybe it'll come back around if I swing my head this way or that. I lost that thought.
Well, it's been a tremendous pleasure sharing with you tonight, Tessa. Thanks for this opportunity to jump into somebody else's slot. My prayers are with that person and their family tonight.
Yeah, I as well. And like I said before, I am so grateful that you jumped in and volunteered your time. I know you're working a lot over there in Montana, but it's so great to have you. And everybody has really been enjoying all the information you've been providing. They're basically at the end of edge of their seats. But if you'd like to share your website one more time, we got a little bit of time for you to do that.
Well, I would love to continue the conversation with your listeners. They can reach me via email using ask@banshaw.com. They can see my website, which is vortexmaps.com, VORTEXMAPS, vortexmaps.com. And there I've compiled, there's hundreds of pages of information about visionary maps. There are many different kinds of visionary maps. There are geometric maps, and there are other kinds as well, other kinds of visionary maps. And so I'll look forward to continuing the conversation via email.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. It was so wonderful having you on the show this evening.
Well, right back at you, Tessa. Thanks for all your good work.
And thank you to everyone in Spaced Out Radio, Facebook, Spreaker, Twitter, Paranormal Radio, TalkStream Live, Deep Talk Radio, and wherever else in the universe you are listening tonight. I had a wonderful time this evening. It was my pleasure, literally and figuratively, and I can't wait to do it again next weekend on spacedoutradio.com. Until next time, nighty-night, love and light to all my space cases out there. And don't forget, we are all in this together. Together we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we own the night. You guys have a wonderful week and the rest of your Sunday. I'll see you back here next weekend. If you guys aren't quite ready for bed, we like to do the after show with you. And you can find us at the same number, 970-335-9596. If you guys want to come on in and chat about this and that or whatnot, I'd love to hear your thoughts and just get to know you on a more personal level. So you guys have a great evening. Don't work too hard this week. And like I said before, I'll see you back here this coming weekend. You guys have a good night. Hope to see you at the after show. Bye-bye.